the goal for boundaries is for more closeness. If you're setting boundaries and it's not bringing you closer to your partner, there's a pretty big chance that that's actually a wall.
This episode for me could not come at a better time. I found myself recently in a situation where my boundaries were violated a few times, not only by another person, but actually by myself. As in, I wasn't respecting my own boundaries. And that can be really common when you're not that gifted when it comes to boundaries. And I always thought I was pretty good at boundaries, but I'm actually realizing that I've been pretty good at putting up walls in some of my past relationships, and that my way of setting boundaries can be actually really limiting and rigid, which is not very fun for other people. So I'm grateful for Silvy Khoucasian that I met on Instagram. By the way, I'm meeting a lot of people on Instagram. It is my platform of choice in terms of finding guests and connecting with folks. And I've been really enjoying Silvy's content. She posts a lot of content around boundaries and attachment styles in relationships and what it takes to make them work. And she's a therapist. She's a relationship coach living in LA. And today we're talking all about boundaries. Silvy has an awesome boundaries program that I was lucky enough to get access to and to go through. We talk a bit about the boundaries program, but we talk a lot about how partners can learn to speak about their boundaries, the importance of finding your own boundaries and then honoring them. We talk about the 4 different types of boundaries, which I didn't know there were that many. There are actually more than 4, but we talk about the main 4. What to do when you feel uncomfortable about your partner's boundaries, how to repair after your partner has violated your boundary. Oh my God. Okay. What can I say? This is a very dense episode, and it's a very important episode because having healthy boundaries, setting healthy boundaries, knowing how to respect them, your own boundaries and other people's boundaries, and then what to do after a boundary's been violated is so incredibly important in forming healthy relationships. And I'm grateful for this conversation because I learned a lot about what it really means to set a boundary. That's it. My name is Sean Galanos, and this is The Love Drive.
We're starting?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Silvy Khoucasian. I'm an associate psychotherapist and relationship coach. And there's so many different things I could say, but what I primarily really focus on is, help singles and couples with their relationships, helping them to create boundaries, but also how to, express themselves and, show up for both themselves and their partner in relationships. And I'm a Middle Eastern gal. I moved to the United States at 4 years old from Syria. So I also have a lot of unique cultural components in my own personal life, but that I like to bring into my work.
Cool. Awesome. So maybe we can start by explaining what is a boundary and why are they so important in relationships?
That's a beautiful place to start and so important, right? Because a lot of us would have, what the hell is a boundary? People all ask me, I don't even know where to start with holding a boundary. How do I know where my boundary is?
What is a boundary?
What the hell is a boundary? So a boundary is, it's something that we create to protect our emotional, physical, spiritual, intellectual, energetic space. And this can be languaged very differently, but the essential component of it is we're protecting ourselves. And, a common distinction I like to make, there's a huge difference between a boundary and a wall. A boundary is actually created so you can then feel safe to be more intimate and loving with the person. Whereas a wall is actually I'm just putting up boundaries. So I'm never going to let you get in so I could protect myself. So there's a healthy version of, protecting our energetic space. And then there's a version that's actually very destructive and unhealthy for relationships, and figuring out which is which, again, is part of that journey.
Yeah, it sounds like boundaries are what we can put in place in order for others to know what is a safe way of them interacting with us. And a wall sounds like something that we put up as a defense mechanism to not allow people to get closer to us.
Exactly. You nailed it, Sean.
So one of them invites connection and conversation and exploration around that boundary and why it's there and what it does. And the other is just like, no, this is a no zone. Do not enter.
Let's think about it just really logically. If I've been physically abused, or if I was put in a situation as a child where I constantly had to be physically affectionate with family, even family members as a young kid, but I was a really sensitive child. So like my body would close down because I didn't feel comfortable, right? And so if my parents weren't tuned into that, my physical boundaries were constantly being violated. As an adult, I might be really sensitive to how people touch me. So if I go to my partner and say, honey, I just want to, share with you that for some reason, I've always felt uncomfortable with people touching me without, asking for permission, or without, just kind of being sensitive to my state, just kind of. So with you, I'd really love if you can approach me gently, if you notice I tense up, if you can, just be really present with me. It's not about you. This is something that I'm working on, that I've had to work through for a long time, rather than don't touch me. Make sure to ask me for permission before you touch me, So there's such a different way, but we can only do that when we own our boundaries, when we make peace that we have them and we're not trying to override them or pretend like we don't have certain sensitivities to things. Then we get ourselves in deeper trouble. Do you have anything that comes up for you when I say that, Sean?
Well, I was just thinking of like, what's a good way of identifying what are boundaries? And then you said, being aware of sensitivities, right? And that seems like a good barometer for, this is a sensation or a behavior that is triggering me in some way, and maybe there's an effective way to put a boundary around this. So that's what came up, is like how to gauge what is and is not a boundary sort of material.
Yeah. And it's such a moment to moment thing. I often say our boundaries will soften around people that respect them. If I have a boundary and I can feel like, okay, they're not forcing me to go beyond what I'm capable of. If I have a limit, if they're trying to push me beyond my limit, I'm going to feel more rigid around them. I'm going to start to put up stronger and firmer boundaries. But if they accept and embrace where I'm at, work with me in a loving way and not try to, again, this other person has to have a confident sense of self in order to do that. And an awareness of their own boundaries. Because a lot of times people that struggle the most with honoring other people's boundaries are people that have not spent any time discovering their own. They tend to be a little bit more codependent. They tend to, go based on what other people are doing. And it's harder for them to really understand what the hell it is.
I'm curious how we can start gaining awareness around like what our boundaries are.
So what I can actually go into, Sean, is talk about the 4 different boundaries.
Yeah. And
how to know if they were violated for you. So knowing if they were violated for you as a child usually helps us better gauge. It doesn't mean that our boundaries could be violated as adults too, but our framework tends to happen as kids. And knowing that they were violated helps us intellectually understand, this is why when I'm in this kind of situation, I freeze. Or even though I feel uncomfortable, I can never actually say anything because I feel disoriented. So the first one that I already shared was the physical boundaries, which is the most obvious boundary. If someone hits you, you're going to know, Sean. You're going to know if somebody, slaps you on the shoulder, or if someone tries to grab me inappropriately. It's obvious. I'm going to feel uncomfortable, and I'm going to feel more entitled to standing up for myself, even though I still might freeze. But I know that morally that this has been this has been a line that's been crossed. And culturally, we embrace physical boundaries.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's just all across the world. Maybe not across the world, actually. I shouldn't say that, because there's some places that get women that get stoned for God knows what. So we won't go into that. But the other three that I found to be so life-changing, Sean, for me to realize, and the woman that wrote about these, her name is Raquel Lerner. I always want to make sure to credit her work. So there's the emotional boundaries. Our emotional boundaries get violated as kids when our parents share secrets with us when we're really young kids that are inappropriate, that we should not be holding secrets as little children. When they make us a surrogate partner, let's say, parents get divorced and now the child is the husband of the mom or the wife of the dad. I mean, they emotionally comfort the parent because of that void that is now present.
Right.
This happens a lot. Another way emotional boundaries get violated is when nobody in the house is willing to feel their feelings. And children are smart. They feel everything. So if mom and dad are not being honest about their emotions, the child is like a sponge, carries everything for the family. And there's usually, it's more sensitive kids that tend to do that. And so as adults, they tend to choose partners that are really shut down or extremely emotionally chaotic that ends up violating their boundaries in the same way that they were violated as kids.
I assume also that children who are with parents that don't process their emotions in a healthy way learn the same mechanisms, which is to bottle it up and not process those emotions, right? We kind of learn from our role models.
Absolutely. And minimizing, oh, it's not a big deal. Your feelings, don't worry about it. Or overriding it. All those things we end up violating and honoring those parts of ourselves. Absolutely.
And like you said, we'll find partners that either mirror that or mirror the opposite so that we can work on it.
Exactly. So it's like one or the other. And it can alternate depending on the stage of our life. If we've done a little bit more work, maybe we'll attract somebody that's more emotional because, we've actually done work. And the way to reclaim the boundaries. Well, I'll get to the reclaiming after, but let me go through the other two just because
Sure.
It might make a little bit more sense. So the other one is intellectual boundaries. So this was the one, Sean, that was the most life-changing for me, that when I realized what happens when somebody violates our intellectual boundaries, because I never thought about it in this way. So let's say you're a kid at home, you have a father or a mother that comes home drunk 5 nights a week, sleeping on the couch. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about what's obviously going on. Nobody's trying to help us make sense of our reality. That child's intellectual boundaries get violated, because they cannot make sense of what's happening. They see what's happening, but nobody's helping them, like you said, process it. You said it exactly. That processing component, both emotionally and intellectually, without our parents doing that, we don't get to build that skill inside of ourselves. So we kind of just feel like a robot, like stuck. Like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Well, because we don't get relationship education in school.
Which is such a shame.
We don't get emotional processing 101, which is madness, actually.
I know. It really is. Can you imagine just learning these things in even just high school or middle school? Whew. Yeah.
I think it would be great.
It would be amazing.
So intellectual boundaries.
Yes. A lot of minimizing, or let's say you have a parent that's a hardcore Republican or a hardcore Democrat, and everyone in the family has to have the same thoughts and beliefs as the father or the mother, because they are the head of the house. Nobody's really allowed to have strong opinions that are different than the head of the house. So then a child is not allowed to have their reality validated. And as adults, these are people that tend to give their power away. If it's time for them to make a choice about something, there are people that tend to find gurus and people that are coaches, but not boundary coaches, that end up telling them what to do instead of actually helping to guide them to come up with the decision that's ultimately going to be best for them. So it takes away their ability to decipher and integrate that sense of self with their intellect. You know what I mean?
I mean, I often struggle with making decisions. I often fear making the wrong decision.
Yeah.
And I also came from the school of it's my way or the highway.
Growing up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
I'm starting to put a lot of things together. The more I work with my therapist and the more I do these interviews.
Wow. Yeah. It's just so helpful to know where we have room to look at these parts, without judging ourselves, without shaming ourselves, without putting ourselves down. One of the boundaries I violated the most for my partner was this one. I would constantly violate his intellectual boundaries in the beginning. I would make assumptions about his experience that was not true. When I would be triggered, I would add all these stories to things. And instead of just saying I felt sad, I would say, and you, I would do this thing. And then one day he came to me, he's like, Silvy, I feel very disoriented when you do this. And I was essentially violating his intellectual boundaries. Had I not listened to that and I just kept going and bulldozing and not taking time to reflect, because that's not my boundary. That's not mine. Mine is more emotional. So if someone doesn't validate my feelings, I'm like, no, this isn't going to work for me, But it's so important that we look at where our partner or friends or whoever we're close with, where they might have had that struggle and help them with it. Now that you told me that you've had your intellectual, boundaries possibly violated, I would be mindful with you, Sean, and know that, it's really important for me to not give you unsolicited feedback or try to tell you how to do something. You know what I mean? Because that would probably be really triggering for you.
That is one of my least favorite things in the world is unsolicited feedback. I
hate it too.
I call it it's a form of verbal abuse.
Exactly.
For me.
For somebody else, that might not be a big deal because that wasn't something that was that didn't come up for them growing up. But for you, it's important. And it's important for me, if I was your partner, to be really sensitive about that. So I'm going to probably still do it on accident, but I can catch myself. I'm like, oh my gosh, shit, Sean, I totally did that thing. I know it's so triggering for you. And I'm so sorry. I know that this is a really big pain point for you. I'm going to work on doing this better, doing a better job of communicating with you,
that sounds incredible. I think everybody wished that they had a partner that can communicate that way.
Yeah. Well, the good news is all we have to do is do a good job of the repair. We can do a shitty job the first time around, but as long as we come back to our partner and recognize where we violated them and own it. So we don't have to do it perfectly the first time because that's exhausting,
Well, it's also impossible. Because
it's impossible.
We don't know the experiences that our partners have. We don't know what their triggers are. We don't know what their emotional responses are and how they deal with that stuff. And so that's the work, right? Every time there's a conflict, you come back and you repair.
And, you just sharing that, in the same way that if I tell somebody, I'm really sensitive to not feeling having my emotions validated. If somebody doesn't care, because that's a vulnerability, just like what you just shared, Sean, you letting me know I don't like feedback. If I keep doing that, you're not going to feel safe around me.
Right.
You're going to get more and more rigid and start to shut down and pull away. And that's why if we don't have the education around what the boundaries are, it's really easy to leave a relationship and still not know what the hell happened. Like, why are we broken up?
Yeah.
Well, did I communicate what my boundaries were? And was I received in a way that my vulnerability was heard? And if it wasn't, did I stand up for myself? And again, it's both sided. Both partners have to be willing to show it and, put our vulnerability out on the sleeve and own it. And the other partner's responsibility is to handle that with care and consideration.
Yeah. And in your boundary program, which is incredible, by the way, and really, really dense and has a lot of phenomenal material, there's a lot of really beautiful scripts on how to talk about boundaries, how to receive boundaries, how to talk about them after they've been violated, how to talk about them with like a repeat violator, right? Like a partner who just consistently crosses your boundaries. And the language is really beautiful. And a lot of it is couched in sort of this is what I need to feel safe. I don't want to tell you what to do, but if you continue to do this behavior, which makes me feel unsafe, I'm going to have to leave.
Yeah. It gives us so much freedom, right?
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that.
It's beautiful to be able to stand up for oneself and say, I don't want to control you, but these behaviors affect me in this way. And in order for me to stay safe, I might have to leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing.
It gives the other person the power to really choose if they're willing to show up. And I think that's the distinction, is when we actually own it and let the person choose for themselves. That's the most vulnerable place to stand, because we have no idea how we're going to be responded to. If we're blaming or criticizing, we're still kind of stuck in that chaotic friction conflict. We're still not being vulnerable. So we're not really putting ourselves really out there, you know? And so we're never going to know how we're going to be met until we do it that way. And especially for men, that's one of the biggest things, to not want to feel controlled and to not want to feel like they're being told what to do. I find that, of course, women have it as well, but I find with men, it's much more sensitive, because freedom is that value, for the masculine, for most men. But I want to go into the fourth and the last one that I work with, Sean, which is the spiritual boundary that can get violated. And there's two parts to this one. Kids they grow up with a fear of God, like parents using God or spirituality as punishment. If you don't do your homework, God is going to do this, or, just constant use of fear tactics to control the behaviors of their child. Kids, of course, are going to grow up terrified. So not only do they feel terror, they feel shame, they feel paralyzed in a lot of ways. And people that, they may have journeyed on a spiritual path may choose not to, because of the way that it was, instilled on them. They don't get to be guided in a journey where they get to really question it for themselves. This is a lot of times when parents, okay, this is church, we're going every Sunday, or this is mosque, or this is temple. They're not talked to. They're just almost expected to have the same faith because they're the children. Our spiritual boundaries can also get violated when our parents are really high and mighty. They don't show any vulnerability, or they don't express making mistakes or that tender side. So kids grow up fearing their parents and just not feeling like they can make mistakes. They don't feel like they can go to their parents for those kind of things.
Because they're expected to know everything.
Exactly. And any unknown or feeling of not being able to make decisions about certain things can be terrifying as an adult. It becomes much harder when we don't have that parent modeling their almost discomfort with certain things that happen for them as parents.
I've learned that the older I get, the less I know. And I would like to be able to communicate that to my children someday.
It's so powerful. I mean, why are we so afraid of not knowing? I mean, it is very vulnerable, but we have to be able to say that. I feel like it gives us such a freedom in all of our relationships and just with ourselves, yes, we have information, but we have no idea how things are going to turn out, no matter how much we try to control things.
Can't control the future.
We really can't.
We
can guide it. We can do our best to guide it,
We can plan. We can plan for it. We can hope for it. We can't control it.
Yeah, absolutely. The last piece I want to say about the spiritual boundaries is the part that really irks me the most, because I have personal experience with this, is working with a coach or a spiritual person that violates your boundaries. This is something that is happening so much. I experienced it with my own partner in the beginning of our relationship when we worked with a coach. And if you're working with somebody, basically, if you're listening to this, if you're working with somebody that is trying to bypass your reality, your logic, your emotions, your experience, they are violating your spiritual boundaries for the sake of, that's your ego, or you need to override this so you can be more enlightened, or you know what I mean? So using affirmations or spiritual mumbo gumbo language to make you not be able to be in your humanness, which is very messy and needs to be messy.
I would like to add on to this note, which I think This is an incredibly important topic that you've brought up. I'm now going through a coaching program at Concordia University in Montreal. And what I know of this program is not what I know a lot of people are doing in coaching. I think a lot of people are telling people what to do. right? And so they're bypassing their client's agenda in order to fulfill their agenda. And if you do a session with me, like there is no advice giving. My job is to guide the conversation, and the client has all the answers.
Absolutely.
And we can brainstorm, we can come up with stuff together, it's a partnership, but I will not be telling you what to do. And your agenda is what's important. And we're going to move that agenda forward. And I think there's a lot of coaching, which is just like, I've got the answers, come see me and I'll tell you what to do. And I think that's damaging.
You said it perfectly. You said it's about my agenda. It's about the coach's agenda, which is so the opposite of being able to heal the person in front of us. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Sean, because that's when you can feel that somebody is not really being present to what's happening for you and is, again, just trying to bypass you to see another point. Here's another perspective here. So look at this. It's so shiny and you can be here. Yes, maybe they can be there, but they have to go through their journey to get there. We can't just force someone to be, past trauma or past things. That is the most damaging thing. And it re-traumatizes people. It literally shuts them down and they have to do the work all over again and in a much more guarded way. And they have to learn to trust again.
Speaking of coaching, this past weekend, we were all assessed on our coaching ability for our coaching program at Concordia, and I'm pleased to announce that I passed with flying colors. So I'm stoked. I'm really, really stoked, and I'm grateful to be able to get to do this work and to join people on their path. And like we said, it's not about my agenda or what I think you should do. It's more about how can we get you to where you want to be in a way that makes sense for you? And my job is to guide the conversation and to provide the framework and to support you in that journey. So that is what I do. And I want to let you know that if you are not where you want to be in your love life or in your ability to cultivate intimacy or to have the kind of sex life that you want, I invite you to reach out to me. We'll schedule a free short phone call to see if working together is a good fit for you. So if this makes sense for you, I invite you to contact me, Sean@thelovedrive.com. That's SHAUN. Or to find out more, go to thelovedrive.com/coaching. We are talking to Silvy Khoucasian, who is a therapist, relationship coach, and we are going deep on boundaries.
I just really, it's so important for me to talk about these boundaries because we're the only ones that can really protect ourselves, and that's by educating ourselves and starting to get tuned into our bodies and paying attention to how people respond to our boundaries. If we're loving, if we're saying it in a loving way, and that's when we know, okay, this isn't really not about me, when we're clear that we're saying it in a vulnerable, kind way, if they're not responding well, that's a big red flag. And it's okay for them to feel rejected. So this is the distinction I like to make. It's okay for them to feel rejected because of course they might just have a visceral response. If we're in the middle of having a sexual moment and we stop and they're at their peak and they feel, they feel rejected. That's okay. But at least for them to put the words and verbalize, I so respect your boundary. I'm upset. I'm frustrated. I have all these things coming up for me, but I want you to know I respect where you're at. And that's the duality of taking care of both people and at the same time in a relationship that is often missed.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful language. And it sort of reminds me of this idea that if I don't respect my own boundaries, how can I expect you to?
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of the work starts with me respecting my own boundaries and knowing what they are and figuring out what they are and then asking for them to be respected.
Hmm.
I had a
Is
situation.
there one?
Yes. Oh my God, is there?
I was gonna say, is there one in particular, like from watching the program that stood out for you? You know?
Well, so just recently, actually, I had someone said this woman that I'm dating really needed to see me yesterday, really wanted to see me yesterday. And I said, hey, sweetie, unfortunately, I'm busy during the day. I've got a whole bunch of prep for some podcasts. I have to get yesterday's episode out. And like, I'm just not available. And we started talking and it kind of turned into an argument that I'm not making space. And then finally I caved because it was easier to just get it out of the way now than it was to figure it out later. And I said, fine, come over. Let's get this thing done. And we did. And then I talked to my therapist later and she was like, oh, that's interesting. You know, did you notice that you had set a boundary there that wasn't respected? And then you didn't respect it as well. And I hadn't even seen it that way until I was sitting down on the couch and started talking about it. And I was disappointed in myself.
Yeah, we can get really angry at ourselves for not honoring our boundaries, for sure. And we can feel that feeling of resentment and like anger towards the other person. But like you said, we're like more angry with ourselves. Like, why didn't I just hold it? You know?
Yeah. I was bummed at them for like not respecting it, but then I was really bummed at myself for why didn't I just say, hey, sweetie, I'm really sorry. I can't meet today. We'll have to plan it some other time.
Totally. What a powerful realization to have, though. You know, we have to have that to know how to do it differently. We have to go through that. We have to fumble with them. Like, we have to kind of feel where we're overriding our own boundaries or where we might be horrible at somebody else's boundaries. Because I work with a lot of people that are on the other side of what you're saying, Sean. Like, my partner has boundaries and I'm really uncomfortable with them. Why? Why am I so uncomfortable with that? That's such a good question. Why are you so uncomfortable with them? Did you never get to feel like you could stand up for yourself, and seeing someone stand up for themselves is hard for you because it reminds you of that part of you that didn't get honored, you know? So there's so many layers, but you know, one of the things that I find that my clients give me feedback on the most is that they actually love the practical suggestions. Cause a lot of times we know this stuff in theory, but like, I have no idea what to say, Silvy. I don't know what words to use. And it sounds elementary, but even for me, I'm like, this is so true. Like, nobody actually gave us the verbiage. Like, what the freaking hell do we tell someone when we're trying to hold a boundary without making them feel like shit about themselves? And you know, what you just shared just reminded me of that. It's like, how do I say, you know, this is not a good time, but then how do I comfort the other person so then I don't cave?
Right. Because she was upset and I could see the conversation ratcheting up, you know, and then it was sort of, okay, now I'm caretaking because I'm not available for this thing that has to happen, that will eventually happen. It just didn't have to happen right then. It was just easier to cave than it was to sort of like, it just got too complicated.
Yeah. Do you think if you would have had language, it would have been easier for you, like practical things to say?
Oh yeah, if I had the script. Although, you know, one of the asterisks on the script is this is a script and it's beautiful when it works out, but when emotions are in the middle and people are either ratcheting up or ratcheting down, the script can kind of fly out the window.
And it's so much harder on the phone too. So, you know, in person, it's easier because we can help calm the person. So what I like to suggest whenever we set a boundary, and this is what we tend to do is, okay, there's a couple of different ways. Number one, boundaries can come out really messy at first if we're not practiced at holding them, because there's so much energy and resentment and anger and feelings and emotions for having not stood up for ourselves for so long that it can come out really harsh and unkind and bleh. You know, for that, we have to learn to acknowledge that, you know, it's not just no is a full sentence. You know, the reality of it is you're going to have no friends if you go around telling that to the people that you actually care about. You know, let's be real.
No, deal with it.
Just look at me while I say no to you and deal with what you're going through, you know?
We need softer language. We need to be humans about it.
Absolutely. So apologizing for that, like if you come out here, hey, you know what? I'm really new at boundaries. I'm still figuring out what they are. And sometimes I don't even know what they are, but this is important for me. I would love to practice with you, and I'd love for you to practice with me and for us to be a safe space for each other. So notice what I just did right here is I actually set a container for a healthy boundary conversation. So before we go into saying boundaries, I'm letting my partner know that I'm going to be bringing boundaries in our dynamic. So it primes them. It gets them prepared. Their nervous system is more ready when it actually comes up, and we can create some kind of agreement before we do it so they know what's coming.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. One of the things that I often say when, before I have something difficult to say, which I imagine boundaries are often difficult to bring up, is, hey, I have something difficult to say. I might fuck this up.
Yeah. I love that, Sean.
But this is an important conversation and you're important to me. And so it's worth having.
Yeah. You were vulnerable. You got to model the vulnerability that, like, just even hearing you say that was like, oh, like it softened me, because I'm just like, it takes courage to say that. And it just makes the other person, made me feel like I want to comfort you. And even though what you're saying is going to be hard.
For you, maybe.
Yeah.
Potentially. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we have these conversations because we care about our partners and we want fulfilling, loving relationships with them.
Absolutely.
I'm assuming.
I would hope so.
I don't have a partner, but I'm assuming.
I would hope so. But there's learning just to be able to acknowledge the messiness of where you are in things, I think is so validating for your partner. Even sometimes when I set a boundary, because I could tend to be on the extreme side sometimes. Like sometimes it can be really rigid, because when you're just discovering things, or when you've come out of a traumatic situation, we can have really firm boundaries. And when we worked with a coach that was really violating, I came out of that feeling very self-protective. And so if I had to learn, sometimes even with a close friend, even as I share a boundary, I'll let them know, I don't know how long I'm going to need this boundary to be here. I don't even know if I need this boundary, to be honest with you. But for right now, I feel like I need it. And, just kind of letting them know that I'm struggling with it myself. Again, it's like kind of what you did. You're creating safety for the other person, so you don't come off as such a rock and such like so invulnerable and unaccessible. That's the point of them. So we can be intimate and soft and loving with each other, rather than just, I'm closing the door and I'm never letting you come in my room at 8:00 and onward, So the goal for boundaries is for more closeness. If you're setting boundaries and it's not bringing you closer to your partner, there's a pretty big chance that that's actually a wall. And especially if they're responding well to them. If they're responding well to them and you still feel a lot of distance, it's worth exploring if that boundary might need to be reorganized a little bit.
So we talked about a container, which is a great first step in setting a safe space in order to talk about boundaries. What would actually setting a boundary look like with somebody? Great.
So whereas I tend to violate my partner's intellectual boundaries, for me, one of the challenges for a lot of partners that I've been with is, again, the emotional boundaries. So if I feel like I'm sharing an upset, and again, like you, I'll say I might, screw this up, I might fuck this up, but I still know internally that I need my feelings to be validated. So I make sure to stand up for that. If it's not happening, I will, after the fight has kind of gone on, I noticed that, I shared something really upsetting with you, and I know I didn't do a good job. I know I probably criticized you, and I'm so sorry for that. But it's really important to me that my feelings are validated. And I used to drill it. I used to kind of drill that home, like, I need it to be validated now, but I've learned to just say that boundary and let it go. Because again, it's free. Your partner has to feel free to do this. You don't want them to feel forced. I'll leave, and then I'll observe, is this person hearing me and coming to me and validating, what? I really totally get that I bypassed your feelings, or I didn't really make space for them. I'm sorry. Maybe you could share it again with me, and I want to be able to listen to you better. I got really defensive, or I shut down. That's how the repair is formed. But I have to be the one to stand up up for that for myself. And if it doesn't happen, let's say that person didn't respond, because this happens a lot. I'm taking mental note here because, again, this is really important to me. Just like for you, if somebody is giving you feedback after you just said, I don't want you to give me feedback, that's going to be a really big conflict of, that just keeps showing up over and over again. So I'll make that mental note. And after a couple of times it's still not happening, I'll bring it up again. Hey, I noticed I brought up this thing that's really, really important for me. And when my feelings don't get validated, I really start to shut down in my body. My body literally starts to close off from you. I don't want that to happen. I really care about you. I care so much about our relationship. I felt really scared that that's happening, but it's important for me that you know how real this is for me. And then again, you have to let it go. And if the person, after doing that a handful of times, because again, we're teaching our partners, this is not an overnight success, you guys. This takes time. You said it perfectly in the beginning. We have completely different lenses. If you're going to be with a partner, you have to make space for that awkward growing stuff. And the thing that we want to pay attention to is, are they making any effort? Are they showing even a 10% willingness to do what we're asking? Even if it's not perfect, but are they trying? If it's nothing, that's a really big red flag. You probably need outside support. And I would encourage you to really make your boundaries a really important priority, because the relationship won't survive. You know what I mean?
If there's no attempt at meeting you, or if there's gaslighting or saying, no, this isn't actually happening, whatever, you're just too sensitive, then there's an issue. But if there's a willingness to meet you, not even halfway, it sounds like you can meet them like a quarter of the way, because over time that will add up and you'll feel safe.
Absolutely. And, being able to acknowledge those little efforts, it's what is going to encourage our partner. Okay. It's different to set a boundary like, hey, I need you to stop while we're having sex. There's no 10% there. They need to stop,
That's 100. Yeah.
It's 100. That's like, again, I'm talking about more subtle boundaries that can be negotiated and worked through over time.
One of the things you said earlier, that you said many times, is that you really need to have your feelings acknowledged, right? That's really important for you. And one of the things that I found really interesting that in the boundaries program that I experienced in my life, I had said something, I don't know if it was a boundary, but it was an emotionally important piece of information that I said to this woman that I'm seeing. And I said, what do you think about that? She goes, oh, I don't know what I think about it. I know how it makes me feel. And to me, I was like, okay, that's the same thing, right? Like, what's your response? And for her response is in the body. And for me, my response is often in my mind, because
fascinating how men and women have a lot of the time that difference.
It's wild.
Yeah. It can really trip us up. Even when I ask my partner sometimes, I'm like, babe, how do you feel about that? Aren't you excited about that? He's like, I don't know, and now I've learned to ask him, oh, what do you think about that?
Right.
I've had to train myself, because I would never ask myself. That wasn't how I would approach me, but he feels so much more acknowledged and like I'm speaking his language. And I have to learn how to do that if I'm going to want him to feel connected. What do you think about that? What do you think about that, babe?
How's that make you feel, sweetie?
Oh, feels good.
I mean, obviously this isn't a hard and fast rule for all men and all women.
No.
But
definitely not.
Often in the podcast, we're now starting to talk about energies, right? People with feminine energy, people with masculine energy. And I'm a Virgo. I'm always in my brain. And I know women that are also like that, that are more, they'd rather talk about what they're thinking rather than what they're feeling.
Totally. Or, even when I work with couples that are, same sex, there's always one partner that is much more self-identified masculine. I don't even bring that language in because I don't ever assume that, one is either or, but they'll be like, yeah, I relate so much more to the thinking and the freedom. And it's just so fascinating how, energetically we attract somebody that, there's a higher thinker and a higher feeler. It's fascinating.
I'm going to have to explore that within my own relationships.
Yes.
So where should we go from here? I have so many notes and I haven't really been looking at them, but I'm just curious, like what makes sense to discuss, taking into consideration everything that we've already discussed?
Sure. I would say, the next step would be, we've talked a little bit about the importance of creating the container as you start to express the boundaries for people, is really learning to understand where you have your pain points, because again, we can't know our boundaries until we validate those things for ourselves. We have to be able to say, ouch, that hurt me, or thinking about our past, reflecting on our past, just based on this conversation, where were some of the things that I did that I did not feel like were needs that I got met. And, there was one thing that I actually forgot to mention was, so people that are physically violated tend to have boundaries, but there's also people that have been neglected, kids that have not had any physical contact, which tend to be very greedy greedy is not the best word. They tend to really seek affection, but in very unbounded ways, because they've been deprived of it for so long that they can crave love, but they can be the ones that actually violate a lot of people's boundaries because of that.
Oh, because they're sort of grasping.
Exactly.
And they hear a no that doesn't really register.
Exactly. So because it can be so triggering to feel like they're being pushed away, they will cling on even more. So it's important, if that resonates, for us to be able to work on, still acknowledging the other person's boundary, but making sure to tend and to work on that, to really find multiple sources for getting your needs met, so you don't put all of that emotional burden on your partner. This is something I talk about so much in my work. Our partner is not going to be capable of meeting all of our needs. We have to have other outlets and resources to take care of ourselves. They have to be the primary person. They have to be the one that we go to for all the important stuff. And, there's a necessary connection there. But we have to also make sure we're spreading that energy in more than one place, multiple places.
Yeah. I agree. I've been going to, people are probably tired of hearing me say this, but I've been going to cuddle parties in order to meet my needs for touch and affection. And I haven't been going as much lately because I've met someone that fills that. But for the kid who is unboundaried in his affection, when he grows up and he's old enough to go to cuddle parties, that could be a safe space for him to get his needs met. And to also, what I really like about these types of events, they're also these relationship and intimacy games events where you learn how to ask for things. And you also learn how to receive a no, which I think we're just not that great at, no one likes to hear no. Yeah.
Nobody likes to hear a no, and then we just leave it at no, and we don't actually comfort the partner that feels rejected for hearing no.
Right.
It's they're a human being, it's okay if somebody gets hurt when you say no, and we can still be loving towards them because we honor the no. We're holding the boundary first. I love that, that you mentioned the cuddle parties, and, what I love about that is that we're acknowledging that we have needs. We're acknowledging that there's physical needs, there's emotional needs, there's spiritual needs, there's all kinds of needs. And when we're not in a relationship, to have safe places to be able to tend to those needs rather than denying them and acting out and doing things that are going to end up being self-destructive or hurtful to other people. Just like a therapist. What is a therapist? A therapist is a person that holds space for you and emotionally helps to regulate you so that you can develop that internal regulating system in yourself. If you haven't had a parent or somebody in your life that has been that safe presence, that's what a therapist is. We're a surrogate, caring, whole space holding presence. So it's we're taking care of the emotional and intellectual component. And what you're describing is that physical component, but it's structured. It's created in a way that people feel safe. And that's so important.
Yeah, there's a container.
It's amazing.
There's a really safe container.
What else do you guys do? So you guys have the intimacy games.
There's intimacy games. There's cuddle parties. There's obviously cuddle plus parties, right? So there's sex parties that I haven't been to one of those in a long time, but that's also another great way if of meeting some of your needs for that kind of intimate touch. I do all sorts of different things. I do dance. I play hockey, which is like, gets my needs for like community aggressive sport out.
Yes. The need for challenge for a man is so important.
The need to score goals.
Yes.
Like dancing.
Solve problems.
Yeah. Contact dancing. And there's all sorts of things that I do so that all of my needs are met. And I have a therapist. I have friends that can hold space. I can call and say, hey, I got to check into something. Are you available? And they'll say, yeah, So
absolutely.
I just can't rely on just one person to get all my needs met.
It's suffocating to do that. It's suffocating for the person you're with, and it's suffocating when somebody's doing that with us. And that's another boundary, you guys. This is another thing where if you are within a relationship with somebody that is expecting so much, everything is a boundary conversation. And, we can exchange the word boundary with agreement, or container. So it doesn't feel so like a boundary. Because, boundary can feel like all these walls. And that's not the purpose of boundary. Boundary is just an agreement that creates the best possible, energetic, dynamic space for a relationship to really thrive for both partners. And creating agreements, if you're with a partner that's maybe has mental illness or is emotionally dumping a lot of stuff on you, it's okay to set limits and to say, hey, honey, I'm feeling really tired. I love that you come to me for this stuff, but, maybe you can also, work with somebody else as you process all these things because it's a lot for me. Oh my God, how hard is that to say? But how important is it to say?
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And some people can get offended, but we have to hold the boundary.
Well, that's the fear. The fear is that they will leave.
Yeah.
If we're honest about our needs, people will leave.
Yeah. Totally.
But that's not often the case, actually.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of beautiful to be with somebody that knows what they need and isn't afraid to ask for those needs to be met.
So attractive to be with somebody that knows themselves and takes the time to communicate it clearly and with love. I mean, what else can we ask for?
That's a good one. And I imagine that takes a lot of work. I mean, there's, we need resources for this stuff.
Yes. And believe me, I talk about this stuff all day, but I screw this up constantly. I apologize to my partner a minimum of 4 to 5 times a week. I'm constantly like, oh God, here's a shame coming up again because I just did a shitty job. But I have the language to come back up out of that. Whereas before I would get stuck in my shame and I would just kind of stay there. I'm like, I guess it's time for me to leave this relationship now because I did a shitty job. Let me go pack up my bags. You know what I mean? Not because of them, but because of me and my own shame of feeling like I have to do things perfect, So it's been helpful just to have language to pull myself back out.
Is there anything that comes to mind as in like a thing that you've had to apologize or a boundary violation that you
I think for me, it was mostly just my language I had to really work on because I would tend to blame a lot instead of getting clear on what was happening for me. I tend to focus out and blame, and I would, blame something that he was doing when in reality I couldn't get in touch with what was happening for myself. So that violates somebody. That doesn't feel good. That erodes trust. That makes them feel unsafe to be with you. And so I had to really see that I was doing that, but he was really good about telling me because a lot of partners or people don't say if someone's being criticizing or blaming, they don't even say anything. So when he would tell me, hey, that you say some hurtful things sometimes when you're mad, Silvy, and I had to hear that. I had to take it in and breathe into that shaming feeling that I felt because of course that's the last thing I ever want to do. But when he did that, I started to be more present and aware that when I would go into that space of blaming, I could pull myself out of there much more quickly and call myself out. Oh my God, I totally did that thing. I totally blamed you. I'm so sorry. I just want you to know that you didn't do anything wrong. This is totally my stuff. I'm still learning how to communicate with you. I suck, but I want you to know that I see what I'm doing and it's not okay. And I've gotten so much better at it. And now I can get to, expressing what's happening for me much quicker. And this for me, having the scripts and the logical side, because I'm so much more emotional, I'm very emotional, it can be reactive. It helps to ground me. It makes it very practical and like, oh, I can pull from this and this, and it brings me back to feeling very centered and grounded.
You know, you said that a lot of your sort of boundary violations are around language and script, and there's this idea or this thing that I sort of know about now, which is sort of dismissive and contentious language. I just had this experience recently where this person that I was talking to said, "You always do this," or "You never do this," and that is incredibly maddening to hear. Because no one is 100% always fucking up or never doing a thing.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
When I hear that, I just get defensive. I start bringing up all these times when I didn't do that thing. And now we're talking about something completely different. I'm having to defend myself.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, one of the things I like to say when somebody says things like, cause I'm really good if someone approaches me with assumptions about me, I call it out right away. Hey, I'll stop them right away. I'm like, hey. Can you please say that differently? Cause I'm not going to be able to hear you. I just won't.
Whoa.
Please. I need you to say that differently. I'm here. I'm present with you. Something's coming up, but I need you to say that differently. And if they don't, I can't. I just can't. Cause I will shut down. I will shut off. And it will trigger me. So I totally get why that would be so triggering and maddening, because it's like you feel completely helpless. Like there is no chance for me to defend myself in this. You've already made up your mind and put me in such a big box that there's no way to come out of that. You know? Were they able to apologize for that eventually?
No.
Yeah. That would be helpful if they were able to see it, that they did that. You know?
Yeah. I'm not sure that's going to happen.
Most people are not willing to own their mistakes or own their slip-ups in their communication. And I find that we think that we're going to look so bad and judged when we do that. But in reality, and this is taking me a long time to really see, is that people trust us and respect us so much more when we can just own our mistakes and our shitty attempts to do things. It's like, oh, wow, they're not perfect. I don't have to be perfect.
It doesn't cost anything to apologize.
Yeah.
I figured that out a little while ago.
Yeah.
You know, it really doesn't. I mean,
Totally.
My ego might take a hit, but my ego can use it.
Use it. Well, and you know, some cultures it's so funny. There's a great book by, Harriet Lerner on Why Won't You Apologize? It's fantastic. It's a fantastic book. And she talks about all the reasons why people don't, because their self-esteem is really, you know, in a really funky place. They don't have a solid sense of self. Their families shame them for making mistakes constantly, or they were forced to apologize for things that they did not even know what they were apologizing for as kids. So all those things combined, it's like we think it's easy. But then in the middle of it, all these things are coming up for us that we have to look at to be able to really meet our partner. Because nobody wants to just hear, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened to you.
Well,
you know?
That's not
a genuine apology.
That's not going to fly with me. How about, I'm sorry you feel that way?
Oh, that's the worst. That is the worst. That's like, I'd rather you not say anything at all than say that to me.
You said that. Why won't you apologize? You said Harriet Lerner?
Yes.
Also, was the other woman Raquel Lerner?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if they're related. I don't know. But I picked up on that too.
Cool. Okay. I just want to make sure I got them right.
You got it.
You wrote on Instagram, so I'm quoting you on this.
Sure.
You can be exceptionally kind and ferociously boundaried too. That is awesome.
Thank you. We have to be. Nobody else is gonna stand up for us in the way that we are. You know, Brene Brown often talks about the most loving and compassionate people are the most boundaried.
Right.
They are. Because they have such a solid sense of self that they can then be so giving to people because they've carved that for them. They take care of that part of them first. And it takes time. It takes effort. It takes a willingness to slow down from your busy week and, journal and to talk about your day and write it out and actually give yourself space to feel your feelings so you know where boundaries may be required. If we're rushing through our week and filling every nook and cranny with something to do, we are not making any intentional space to get to know ourselves. That's what a lot of us do, especially here in the West, where there's such a push for productivity and, getting things done. And it's exhausting. It's like that model does not work for most people.
Yeah, I'm moving away from the always being productive, always hustling to something that is a lot more manageable. Like I've stopped using an alarm to get up.
Wonderful.
Turns out I get up around the same time with or without the alarm. Yeah, but there's less stress.
What time do you get up?
It's 8:00 in the winters, which is really late, and now it's starting to get like 7:15, and I assume that in the summer it'll be more like 6:30 or 6:15.
Wow, so you're early bird.
Yeah, I guess. But I'm moving away from negative self-talk about how productive I need to be in order to be successful, and working more in sort of trying to be more gentle with myself. And if it's not happening, it's not happening. I'm not gonna tell myself that I'm a loser. I'm just gonna be like, all right, this is not happening right now, but maybe a walk around the block will do me well. What can I do right now to take care of myself?
Absolutely. And so much of our creativity and our inspiration and our brain getting inspired happens when we're resting, when we're not doing anything. I mean, think about it. For most of us, at least this is how it happens for me. As soon as I'm ready to go to sleep, because I'm going into that really drowsy state, all my Instagram ideas will come up, or my blog stuff. It always sparks when I'm in that restful state. But if we carved out time to make that more of a priority, we can tend to, even just journaling. I'm reading Brené's book called Rising Strong, another fantastic book. I love books. I take them everywhere. She talks about how even 20 minutes of journaling, I think 4 days a week, is life-changing for people to sit down and write about what they experienced in the day, their thoughts, their feelings, and creating that intimate space. Journaling is the number one, intervention that I recommend to all my clients, because it literally balances the right and the left brain, and it connects them and has them communicate in such a powerful way that you integrate your experiences rather than just kind of getting, you get triggered by something, you don't really deal with it or look at it, you just keep moving through the week, and then the next week you get triggered by something else, and now you have these things stacked, and then 4 months later your partner says, hey, can you open the cupboard, and you explode. That's what happens when we don't take time to process our stuff.
Yeah, and when we fill our days with distraction and activities and projects, and there's no time to rest.
Yes.
When you do sports, a lot of the growth happens in your rest. And your body regenerates when you sleep, and your mind and everything. So this seems like another positive of taking it easy sometimes. Yes.
Absolutely. Sleep is where we do a lot of repairs. Our dreams are also, where we process a lot. It's our emotional part of our brain. When I work with clients, I often ask them, what have you been dreaming about? I had a client that, they process a lot of what's coming up for them. So, as far as the boundaries, just paying attention to where you feel resentful, where you feel, like you cave, like you're not really holding those boundaries, like similar to what you were sharing, or where you're not good at honoring other people's boundaries, and just journal. Even if that's, from listening to this, I think people can really benefit from journaling what got triggered without trying to contain what comes out of you. Just write it out. What is being sparked through this conversation, and let yourself free flow with that.
That's a beautiful resource. Do you have any other suggestions before we move on to just a few final questions?
Sure. Resources. So the journaling is my number one. If you are not in a relationship, So if you are or if you're not, find one person that you can have that container talk with, letting them know, hey, I really want to start practicing the boundaries. I'd love to practice with you. I'd love for us to do this together. And if you're single, do this with a close friend that you already have safety with. This is not something you want to practice with people that you're just getting to know or that they've already kind of proven to not be safe for your vulnerability. That's essential. We want to practice with safe people. So having that container talk and then starting really small, baby steps. Start with something that maybe is not that big of a risk for you to say. You're not going to, if you have a huge history of trauma, don't go there, go to something small. Like I'm trying to think of an example on the spot. One of the things that I know for me, I have to set a boundary on is like if I meet someone new and they're wanting to kind of go into work mode right away or maybe they're sending me a lot of messages, but they're not really waiting for me to respond. I can get really triggered by that. It's my own stuff, totally. And I'll maybe letting them know something like, hey, if you mind, if you would be okay with just waiting till I respond before sending me some other stuff, just so I can manage and regulate myself with that experience. And starting with something small. So you feel like you build your confidence with setting boundaries. You set yourself up to win. You set yourself up to, again, just small baby steps. And then I'm trying to think of another resource that's really helpful for boundaries, is being gentle with yourself. If you don't do it perfectly, if you don't own it well, if you don't express it kindly in the first try and maybe it comes out harshly, just be prepared to apologize a lot during this process. Make space for repair as much as you can. That is just as important as the boundary itself. That is actually, it doesn't matter how many times we have conflict with people. It's not the frequency that matters at all, actually. It's been studied by the Gottman Research Institute. It's how well we do the repair. So if you do a shitty job, just own it. Just go back to your partner or your friend, whoever you're practicing with. Like, I'm sorry I said it that way. I'd love to try again and do it in a more productive. And there's a learning curve with this stuff. Most people want to skip the learning curve, but it's not possible. This is the messy stage.
You got to get through it.
Yes. Yeah.
To get the fruit on the other end.
The fruit on the tree. What is it?
You have a boundary program. Where can we find that?
So the boundary program, I'll send you a link for that. It's $67. And like you mentioned, it covers all different topics, how to set consequences if your partner's not meeting your boundaries, how to language boundaries when you're first dating, because that's something I tend to work with a lot of people. We're like, this is so new. How am I supposed to set boundaries with a guy or a girl that I just met? Well, actually, you have to, you should. And I give scripts for all kinds of scenarios on how to do that. So anyways, I'll send you the link for that.
Cool.
And also my Instagram page is where I constantly offer free support. I do live sessions, and I post stuff on boundaries, stuff on attachment styles, which is another part of my work that I really specialize with, and all kinds of free goodies.
What is the Instagram page? I'll obviously link to it, but if people are listening right now, they just want to go there.
Sure. So it'll be Instagram.com/Silvy Khoucasian, and it's spelled SilvyKhoucasian.
No problem. You got that, everybody?
It's just Khoucasian.
So I'll obviously link to all of that in the show notes. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that we would be doing a disservice not talking about? Or did we do a fairly good job of getting people some help with their boundaries? I
think we did a pretty damn good job with talking about a good range of boundaries.
Not only did we do a fairly good job, we did a damn good job.
A damn good job.
I have one more question for you.
Sure.
And this is a bit of a curveball. I didn't tell you I would ask you this, but what is love to you?
Oh, what is love to me? So love is being able to care for somebody else, even as you're struggling to understand what's happening for them.
That's awesome.
I'm going to write that down for myself, Sean.
write it for your Instagram. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you and your dedication to this work and your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. And I'm so grateful for you inviting me on and being part of your amazing work. And I can't wait to listen to this.
All right, my lovebirds, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of The Love Drive. Silvy Khoucasian can be found on Instagram at Silvy Khoucasian, and all the links of the resources and the Boundaries program and how to find Silvy, all that stuff lives in the show notes on your podcast app or on my website, thelovedrive.com. One more thing. I've been building this business for a few years now, but I'm not like the best entrepreneur, and I realize that. I mean, it's hard to make money giving free love advice. And one of my big focuses this year is growing this into a sustainable business, because right now at this point, we can call the Love Drive a very expensive hobby because I have a lot of fees that are generated by just putting out a podcast every week. So if you want to support me and you're not interested in my coaching services, I have a newsletter. I'm not actively using it, but I'm building it because eventually I have big plans for the Love Drive this year and in future years that are going to include programs and ebooks and resources that can help you cultivate love and build intimacy. And if you're interested in supporting me and you want to get on this newsletter, the best way to do that is to go to thelovedrive.com/newsletter or send me a DM. Tell me you want to get on the newsletter and I will manually add you. There's also a link in my Instagram profile. That's it. If you want to just continue listening to the podcast, because the podcast will always be free forever and ever, I'm so glad that you have decided to spend this hour with me this week. Thank you so much.